everyone. How wonderful to be with you. It's just really nice to be here with you, here in ISKCON Estcourt. All glories to ISKCON Estcourt. And you've got such a magnificent temple here, isn't it? It's really quite something. When it's completed, it'll be, what would it be? The third largest temple in ISKCON in South Africa. Fourth. What will be the third?
Not sure.
I think it'll be the third. It's a lot bigger than Maritzburg. Yeah. Anyway, it'll be one of the biggest. And one of the best. Really. I do think that it's only Radha Radhanath in Chatsworth and New Jagannath Puri in Phoenix, Durban, which are larger, and they are larger, but maybe not that much. Anyone know how many square meters is the temple room? We should figure it out sometime.
Floor space is about 325 square meters.
Here.
It's third largest.
Oh, okay. Radha Radhanath is 450. And New Jagannath Puri in Phoenix is over 500. It's the biggest temple room, at least, that we have. But anyway, Hare Krishna. How nice to be here with you all and seeing many faces who I know, like Mataji, Devaki, Radhika. Hare Krishna. How nice to see you again. Hope all is well. Good. And all of you. So now, I was asked to say something, if I remember correctly, about association, isn't it? What was it exactly?
Staying in ISKCON and associating.
Oh, staying in ISKCON and associating. Okay, well that's good. That's nice. Let me, or rather, could you please repeat after me? Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Yes, well, first of all, just to go a little bit into the subject of the association of devotees in a general sense, I will read Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, chapter 18, which is titled Maharaj Parikshit Cursed by a Brahmin Boy. And I will read verse 13. Tuliyama lavenapi nasvargam napunar bhavam bhagavat sangi sangasya martyanam kim utashisha. Translation: the value of a moment's association with the devotee of the Lord cannot even be compared to the attainment of heavenly planets or liberation from matter. And what to speak of worldly benedictions in the form of material prosperity, which are for those who are meant for death. That's really a good verse, isn't it? about the association of devotees. Let me just point out a very interesting and important thing about this verse. That this verse appears exactly as it is. It appears twice in Srimad Bhagavatam. The second time, let me just check. The second time is Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 30, verse 34. And, if you look at the two, you'll see they are literally identical. They're completely identical. And that's interesting because in Srimad Bhagavatam, and even let us just look at a much smaller book, much smaller, Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita, in terms of number of verses, is 1/20th the size of Srimad Bhagavatam. So Srimad Bhagavatam, well, it's 20 times bigger than Bhagavad Gita. So just in those terms, Bhagavatam is much, much bigger. Yes, so in Srimad Bhagavatam, well, let me just say, in Bhagavad Gita, there are two verses which appear twice, but not exactly. They are somewhat different. Somewhat different. One of them is the verse, what is it now? Manmana bhavamad bhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru mam evaishyasi yuktvavam atmana matparayana. That's chapter 9, verse 34. But then in chapter 18, verse 65, it appears as Manmana bhavamad bhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru mam evaishyasi satyam te pratijane priyosi me. It's not exactly the same. It is, it's sort of about, I know you could say, 1/3 different. Then there's another verse, the verse which says that, the Sanskrit I can't remember offhand, but the translation is, better to do your own duty imperfectly than someone else's perfectly. Yeah. Distraction in the course of performing your own duty, anyway, the basic idea is not detrimental. So that appears roughly twice, but not exactly. Here we have, in a 20 times bigger book, this verse is literally repeated, identical. And here's an interesting point, in regard to verses being repeated identically. Later on in Srimad Bhagavatam, there's the story in the 10th canto of Lord Krishna encountering Pondraka. You may or may not have heard of Pondraka, but he was one of the many, we call them demons, who appeared when Lord Krishna was present here and tried to challenge Krishna and, fight with him and kill him, actually. But they were all killed by Krishna. So this was the case with Pondraka also. And the thing about Pondraka, a very interesting thing, is that he thought he was an incarnation of the Supreme Lord. And indeed, he promoted himself as such, like publicly declared himself as such. And in doing that, he challenged Krishna, saying that Krishna, you have the conch, the club, the chakra, the lotus flower. These are the 4 symbols of Vishnu. You have them, but they're mine. Give them back, or I'll kill you. To which Krishna sort of casually responded, well, if you want them back, come and get them. And he came to get them. And Krishna said, all right, you can have the chakra first. The chakra, the Lord's disc weapon, razor sharp. And Krishna said, okay, you can have it, but you have to catch it first. And Krishna then threw it. And this Paundraka, he would not have made the Indian cricket team, or any cricket, even like a school cricket team. He couldn't catch the chakra, and the chakra decapitated him, and that was the end of him. So that the thing is, at the beginning of that chapter, there is a verse which states, Shukadev Goswami, the speaker of the Bhagavatam, says that there was a demon named Paundraka, and he was so crazy, he claimed to be the Supreme Lord. Verse stating basically along those lines. Then about maybe half a dozen or several verses later, he kind of repeats it, not verbatim, but he says something to the effect that there was this demon named Paundraka, and he was such a ridiculous person that he claimed to be God. So, it's the same message. And one of our commentators, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he makes the point that, and get this, if you can get this, he says, in such a small book as Srimad Bhagavatam, small book, you get me, right? Small book. Small book. You've seen it, It takes a whole box to carry one copy. Yeah. What is it, 12 volumes or something? Or more, whatever it is. Is it 18? 18, yeah. By our standards, it's probably the biggest book we've ever encountered. But he says, in such a small book as Srimad Bhagavatam, which is only about 15,000 verses, to find one verse which is repeated, because everything's so succinct and just to the point, with no excess verbiage, no extra words. Keep it right to the point, because there's so much information. It's kind of being compressed into this relatively small space. So he says to find 2 verses which are, almost identical is practically unheard of. And he says that Shukadev Goswami, he repeated the message of the first verse, that, this man was so crazy and so on, because he was so astonished he couldn't believe it. Someone is claiming to be God who's not God. This is just absurd in the extreme. In the extreme. It's so absurd that he repeats the verse. He's just like amazed. How could it be? So anyway, devotees and friends, pardon me going on and on about this, but we have 2 verses here which are actually identical. They're literally identical to the letter. And what does that indicate? It indicates the message of these verses is of exceptional importance, exceptional, for it to be repeated. It's an act of emphasis. Wow, extreme emphasis. So we should try and get this point. Let me read the verse again, at least the translation. Even a moment's association with a devotee of the Lord. Just a sec. The value of a moment's association with the devotee of the Lord cannot even be compared to the attainment of heavenly planets or liberation from matter. And what to speak of worldly benedictions in the form of material prosperity, which are for those who are meant for death. The association of a devotee, and what to speak of, here we have 20 or whatever, 20 or 30 devotees, including our Newcastle super duper kirtan team, who you've been hearing from. It's okay. But no, they're good, they're nice. Yeah, so the value of just a moment's association is so great. Just brief association. What to speak of like every day for years, or even, once a week for years, or whatever, something like that. Just the value of a moment's association cannot be cannot be compared to attaining heavenly planets or being liberated from matter, mukti. And what to speak of trying to compare it to ordinary material benedictions in the form of material prosperity, which are for those who are meant for death. You know as well as I do, or better, that in this world people generally are really, really trying to get money and material comforts. They really try to get ahead in life. And, I read, actually it was before COVID, in fact, about one man who in America won a lottery and won something like $100 million US. Nowadays that would be approximately in the region of 2 billion rands. Yeah, because the rand is so close to worthless. But anyway, that's by the way, just to wake you up a bit. When I came in 1980, it was $1.33 to 1 rand. I remember because I came and I had to change some US dollars. Okay, so anyway, this man won something along the lines of $100 million. And now there's a report in a newspaper from his wife, that this man won all this money and immediately gave up working, got a mansion, got a Rolls Royce or, a few very, very expensive motor cars, and then he didn't know what to do. Started drinking. After a while, he became alcoholic, and one night he was in a bar drinking too much as usual, got into a fight in the bar and was killed. This is say 2 years or maybe even 18 months after winning about $100 million. So the wife now, the husband's late already, the wife is now writing some article for a newspaper in which she said, I wish he had not won anything. I wish we had just stayed the way we were, just sort of, normal, working people and going on with life. I wish, but it was too late. So yeah, material prosperity, it can only take you so far. When you find amongst people, like even population groups, which have been severely repressed economically, perhaps in many ways, but including economically, that when they suddenly are no longer repressed, and now they have access to money in ways they didn't have access before, they lose it. They lose it. And they waste money, and money becomes like a god to them. A friend of my father's, I don't talk about this often, but I'll tell you now. A friend of my father was a business person. One of his friends got a Rolls Royce, brand new. And he's driving around, and I don't know if you've ever driven or been driven in a Rolls Royce, but people stop and stare at you. So many people stop and stare at you. It really puts you off having a Rolls Royce, actually. Oh, yeah. So this man, he's driving along, and he wasn't, sort of the type of person who should have a Rolls Royce. Means he didn't really know how to look after a special vehicle. So he's driving along. This is, more than 50 years ago. It's like 60 years ago. And the oil light flashed. Means things running out of oil. But he thought, no, it's a Rolls Royce, it's all right. So he's driving along. Now the oil light starts flashing regularly. No, it's okay, it's a Rolls Royce, don't worry about it. Now he's driving along, the oil light is on, red. It's all right, it's a Rolls Royce, don't worry about it. Then suddenly, the engine seized up completely. Finished. Such a person should not have a Rolls Royce. Anyway, yeah. Sorry to tell you that story. But it's just, it's interesting. People who don't know what to do. Well, there's famous saying, a fool and his money are easily separated. Yeah. So I diverge. The thing is that the association of devotees is so valuable, and not just in the theoretical sense, but so helpful. Just a little. It can help you so much that you just cannot compare it to things which so many people will think are just the best things in the world. You can't even begin to make a comparison. Let me just read a little bit of Prabhupada's purport. When there are some similar points, it is possible to compare one thing to another. But one cannot compare the association of a pure devotee to anything material. Men who are addicted, and Prabhupada is using the word men in a, what would you say? What is it? Well, yeah, but there's a term.
Neutral.
Generalized. Okay, it's like generalized. Just means people. rather than saying men and women, but he's saying men and women actually. Yeah. So men and women who are addicted to material happiness aspire to reach the heavenly planets like the moon, Venus and Indraloka, and those who are advanced in material philosophical speculations aspire after liberation from all material bondage. When one becomes frustrated with all kinds of material advancement, one desires the opposite type of liberation, which is called apuna bhava, or no rebirth. But the pure devotees of the Lord do not aspire after the happiness obtained in the heavenly kingdom, nor do they aspire after liberation from material bondage. In other words, for the pure devotees of the Lord, the material pleasures obtainable in the heavenly planets are like phantasmagoria. And because they're already liberated from all material conceptions of pleasure and distress, they're factually liberated even in the material world. This means that the pure devotees of the Lord are engaged in a transcendental existence, namely in the loving service of the Lord, both in the material world and in the spiritual world. As a government servant is always the same, either in the office or at home or at any place, so a devotee has nothing to do with anything material, for he is exclusively engaged in the transcendental service of the Lord. Since he has nothing to do with anything material, what pleasure can he derive from material benedictions like kingship or other overlordships, which are finished quickly with the end of the body? Devotional service is eternal. It has no end because it is spiritual. Therefore, since the assets of a pure devotee are completely different from material assets, there is no comparison between the two. Yes. So, you can't compare like, apples and oranges. Well, at least they're both fruits. So you can make a comparison in that sense. What about an apple and a motor car? Try and make a comparison. Well, they're material. So, they're both temporary. That you could say, and it's definitely true. But, beyond that, an apple and a motor car, there's not a lot of grounds for comparison. But between the results that a devotee gets and the results that a non-devotee gets, there's no real grounds for any comparison. Because first thing, every non-devotee is due to die, whereas every devotee is due to not die. Yeah. They're eternal. The devotees are eternal. Means the devotees who are living in the kingdom of God particularly. So you certainly can't make any meaningful comparisons. Being a devotee, or particularly an advanced devotee, puts you on a level of existence which the non-devotees cannot really touch. Life is eternal, the happiness is eternal, the knowledge is unlimited. You know, one thing that Prabhupada said about the knowledge of people who are living in the kingdom of God, at least, like pure devotees living in the kingdom of God. Here, of course, we cannot remember any of our previous lifetimes. Occasionally, apparently, you get some people who they may be able to, at least they claim to be able, and in some cases, you know, they can give descriptions of places they say they were in their previous life, but in this life they haven't visited. And they give exactly accurate descriptions. Yeah. Or in some cases they give descriptions of a place they say they were in their previous life. Now it's not looked like that. Because in the meantime, the place got changed. And now they find that actually it did look like that back X number of years before. Anyway, you never know. It could be some tricky sort of thing going on. It's not impossible. But at least these people claim to remember something from a previous life. But it's not much. Like, what did a building look like? You know, it's not really very much. For example, Prabhupada, there's one place in, I forget which of his books, but there's one place I was just reading recently. Prabhupada says that our memories are not good. Prabhupada says, if I was to ask you what you were doing at this moment yesterday, would you remember? At 2:33 and 21 seconds yesterday, would you remember what you were doing, what you were actually thinking and what you were actually doing? Not just, well, you know, I was at work, I was sitting there. Not like that, but something in detail, what you were actually doing. And what to speak of 10 years ago, 2014, on the 1st of September at 2:34 and 1 second. Completely forget it altogether. There's just no question of it at all. Absolutely no question. Because our memories, well, have you ever heard about having a memory which is like a sieve? You know? Most things just pass straight through. A little bit gets caught behind, but not much. So that's the condition we're in. But Srila Prabhupada, and what to speak about a previous lifetime. But Prabhupada makes the point, it's in one letter. If you search through his letter books, you'll find it. I found it many years ago. Prabhupada says that when you're living in the spiritual world, you can remember all of your lifetimes in this world. All of them. Even in detail. All of them. And there's been many, many, many. So in other words, the state of consciousness as we have it, that we have now, and the state of consciousness in that situation is just so incredibly different. And Prabhupada says in that letter, he makes the point that it is mercy that we cannot remember much. And Prabhupada says, because if we could remember all the ways we died, how we were killed when we were in lower species particularly, how we were killed under horrific conditions, and just dying anyway at the so-called best of times can't be so nice. But to remember these things, Prabhupada says, it would be so traumatic. Like, I don't know if you've met people who were like soldiers who fought in wars. There's one devotee of ours, his name is Papa Sarati, not from Durban, he's American. He fought in Iraq. He was a sergeant in the American army in Iraq. And he came and stayed in South Africa for a while. Not so long ago, just before COVID or something. But he was a disturbed person. You know, he had been every day on the battlefield. He was in charge of a group of soldiers. And he said a number of them died in his arms. And, you know, it was extreme, very extreme. And you just spent a little time with him, you could see he's actually traumatized by it. Yeah. And so many of these soldiers who were in Vietnam, or, you know, I mean, there's not many left who were in the Second World War. My maternal grandfather was in the First World War. And you can look him up in Wiki. Norman Duthie, he got a DSO for, anyway, in action in the trenches in the First World War. He's there in Wiki, Norman Duthie. And he still had bits of a bullet in hair and I think in his feet or something. But you could tell he was traumatized. It was extremely heavy. So Prabhupada says that the experiences like that are just so disturbing. The experience of death, particularly under like extreme circumstances, that it is Krishna's mercy. Specifically, he gives as his mercy that they can forget. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to deal with it. And then their lives would just be very, very difficult indeed, or even too difficult. But Prabhupada makes the point, when a person has returned to the kingdom of God, he can remember all the previous lifetimes, because the consciousness is no longer covered by ignorance, by tamagun. That's gone. Now the consciousness is free. So, yeah, but consider the consciousness now. Like I mentioned, how much do we forget what we've done today? You know, particularly if you talk about detail, what I did yesterday, what I did a month ago at this time. It's gone. It's just gone. That is the nature of ignorance. In the spiritual world, there is no ignorance. It doesn't exist. It's only in the material world that ignorance exists. Yes. So, in other words, life in the spiritual world and life here, these are so different. So different, you can't really make a comparison. Not like a meaningful, like a real comparison, like you can between certain things which have real similarities. So anyway, the value, and he's saying the value of a moment's association, not the value of, 10 years association, or even just a whole day's association, or something like that. Just the value of a split second. In fact, the term used is lava, tuliyama lavenapi. Lava is what has been translated as a moment's association. Lava is a Vedic unit of time it is generally 1/11th of a second. So talk about brief association. But the value of just a split second's association with a devotee cannot be compared to things which materialistic people think are just so extremely desirable and just so glorious and wonderful. Yeah, it's amazing. Because, and you know, one point is, if it's just a little association, what instruction could a devotee give you in 1/11th of a second? Nothing. In 1/11th of a second, you can't even say Hare Krishna. You can't say Hare Krishna. That was Hare Krishna, but you might not even make it out. I don't know if it was an 11th of a second, but... So what is it? Well, what it is that from the heart of particularly an advanced devotee, there is an emanation of transcendental Shakti, transcendental potency, which if you just get exposed to it for an 11th of a second, makes such an impact on the heart that it can transform you or be like the key to an unstoppable transformation of you. Yeah. So that's just, in a fraction of a second's association. And what to speak of regular association with instruction and guidance and example and all these types of things. So it's really important to get the association of devotees. And then of course, you could say, there's sort of a saying or a way of expressing a certain point. Like, you could say, there are cars and cars. Sounds like it's a nonsense. But the idea is that there are ordinary cars and there are very special cars. So anyway, there are devotees and there are devotees. And there are sort of regular devotees. They're special enough. They're special enough. But then there are really very special devotees. And if we get their association, which means not just spending time together, but getting instruction, guidance, and learning, being able to ask questions and, interactions like that, which are just of inestimable value, actually. But then again, there are devotees and devotees. And, Srila Prabhupada, he emphasized what would you say? Well, you could say the bona fidity of how he was presenting Krishna consciousness. Like his Bhagavad Gita. What's his Bhagavad Gita called? As it is. Yes. In Hindi, what is it? Yatha Rupam. Right?
Yatha Rup.
Yatha Rup. Oh, I thought it was Yatha Rupam. Anyway, as it is. Yeah. As opposed to Bhagavad Gita as it isn't. And there are many versions of that, like Bhagavad Gita as I would like it to be. Bhagavad Gita as my grandmother taught me. Bhagavad Gita what?
As it suits me.
As it?
As it suits me.
As it suits me. Yes. These are all different versions of Bhagavad Gita as it is out. Yeah, right. Sure. And there are plenty of them. Prabhupada made the point that when he first came to the Western world, there were already a number of versions of Bhagavad Gita in English. I don't know how many, but I don't think 100, but there are at least 10 or 20 or something along those lines, translations of Bhagavad Gita. And I can even confess to you, here's a confession, I read one of them before Prabhupada came, or maybe around the time he came, but I didn't know anything about him coming at that time. Yeah, in my philosophy course, or before actually I was studying philosophy, I read they call it the Penguin Bhagavad Gita. Penguin is a publishing house. Yeah. Doesn't mean Bhagavad Gita for penguins or by penguins. It means Bhagavad Gita from the Penguin Company. From the Penguin Company. I'm sure it's still around. It's a famous, big publishing company. So I read it. And you know what? I came out at the end not knowing whether I was coming or going. Or I came out at the end really thinking, this is rubbish. That's actually what I thought. Because it was full of kind of clever, inverted commas, clever types of statements which didn't make much sense. But they're like wise-isms. People, they read them and think, wow, that's wise. But actually doesn't really make sense. Like an example of a wise-ism, which some of you may be familiar with, one of the last songs that the Beatles made was called I Am the Walrus. Pretty crazy sounding title. I Am the Walrus. And John Lennon is singing, and at one point he speaks, and he says, I am you, and you are me, and we are all together. And when I heard that, it was quite some time before I became a devotee at all. But, in our sort of hippie kind of intellectual environment, I heard that I am you, and you are me, and we are all together. And I remember very clearly thinking, wow, that's the Beatles, it must be cool. Doesn't make sense. But after a while I figured out, no, I am not you, I am me, and you are not me, you are you. And we're not exactly together. We're sort of, in a sense, we're kind of together, but we're not really together. And I realized, this is rubbish, actually. This is rubbish. And that so-called Bhagavad Gita it had stuff like that in it. So anyway, Prabhupada said before he presented Bhagavad Gita as it is, there was some number, quite some number, versions of Bhagavad Gita in English. Prabhupada made the point that not one of them had made one person to become a devotee of Krishna. But that's actually what Krishna is trying to do in the Bhagavad Gita. He is trying to convince people, by convincing Arjuna, he's trying to convince us to become his devotees. That's it. Full stop. That's what he's trying to do. But in these versions, not one person had become a devotee. Yeah. But then, of course, Prabhupada presented his Bhagavad Gita as it is, and thousands, and then millions, and then tens of millions of people, at least tens, maybe hundreds of millions, became devotees. This is very important. This is of extreme importance, and we should try to sort of absorb the idea, get the message. Because can you imagine someone is trying to sell something and they got a crowd gathered around them. When I was in London distributing books in the streets, right in the center of London, you get these people coming, these gangsters, with stolen goods, usually children's things. And they'd have people looking out for the police this way and that. And then right on the street, because in central London, in the middle of the day, it's just packed out. And then one guy would just start shouting out about whatever they've got. And in the shops, it's £20. But today, you get it for £1. And normally people would just come running in and take all that they had. But can you imagine if you're trying to sell something and you make a big announcement and people are there and you say, yes, so you can get it for however much, and no one buys one? How would that be? No one buys one. Then you got to know you're a bit of a failure, isn't it? You haven't made it. But that was what was going on. They couldn't get people to accept the message that Krishna is presenting, and it's his only goal is to present that. Not one. To become a devotee. Not one. Means they're failures. Maybe they sell lots of books to people who like sort of wise-isms and little clever ideas which don't make good sense, because there are people like that. But beyond that, to actually help people as Krishna's trying to help them, not a single one. It's pathetic. It's literally hopeless. So the bona fidity, the genuineness has to be there. Otherwise it doesn't work. Just doesn't work. It fails. Fails completely. So therefore, Bhagavad Gita as it is. And then Srila Prabhupada established his institution, ISKCON. Here we are in ISKCON, Estcourt. And Prabhupada created ISKCON in such a way, as the person who's like the expert, particularly in the Western world, but practically anywhere. Prabhupada designed the process. Step 1, step 2, step 3. The system, how to do it, and the social environment for it. Because he's so expert, he designed all these things to facilitate the whole experience of following Bhagavad Gita as it is, living Krishna consciousness as it is, not in some other way. So therefore we, devotees and friends, we are very fortunate. First of all, we're very fortunate to have Bhagavad Gita as it is. I assume you have it at home. And the other books that Prabhupada presented, they're all as it is. So we're really fortunate. but we're really fortunate also to have the environment within which to practice it, to try and utilize the information. It's really important. And Prabhupada, he spoke strongly against people trying to become Krishna conscious while, well, a few things. Try to become Krishna conscious without a guru. Do it yourself. Buy the book and do it yourself without a spiritual master. He was just not into that at all. And to try to avoid sort of the social environment of Krishna consciousness, the community of Krishna consciousness. And I'm going to read you a couple of sentences from the purport. You can make a note of this. Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th canto, chapter 9, verse 11. 4:9:11. Listen to this. The significant point, this is the story of Dhruva Maharaj. The significant point in Dhruva Maharaj's statement is that he wanted the association of pure devotees. Transcendental devotional service cannot be complete and cannot be relishable without the association of devotees. We have therefore established the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Anyone who is trying to be aloof from this Krishna Consciousness Society and yet engage in Krishna Consciousness is living in a great hallucination, for this is not possible. From this statement by Dhruva Maharaj, it is clear that unless one is associated with devotional service, with devotees, his devotional service does not mature. It does not become distinct from material activities. What do you think of that? Were you ready for that, or have I shocked you? Are you all right?
That was right.
Do you need resuscitation or something? Let me just read the last bit there. Anyone who's trying to be aloof, well, anyway, we've established the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, so you get the association of devotees. Anyone who's trying to be aloof from this Krishna Consciousness Society and yet engage in Krishna Consciousness is living in a great hallucination, for this is not possible. From the statement by Dhruva Maharaj, it is clear that unless one is associated with devotees, his devotional service does not mature. It does not become distinct from material activities. You remain in a mixed condition, mixed up condition, in other words. Yeah, so there you go, devotees, some thoughts on the subject. Like I said, there are devotees and devotees. There are devotees and devotees. But, actually there are different levels. In fact, relative to us as individuals, and this is very personal, relative to you, maybe not relative to him. Yeah. In relation to each one of us, there are devotees who are more senior than us, more advanced. There are devotees who are more or less on an equal level with us. And there are devotees who are junior to us or